yes, I totally can. I'll share a little bit in a second. I shared a little bit earlier, but I'll share a little bit more in a minute. So the beginning of this psalm, right? It's calling back to a time when God was faithful, when he heard the author's cry. And I think one of the good exercises for us as Christians is to have that kind of, maybe it's a journal of answered prayer. Maybe it's a time that you write down every time God's been faithful to you. And so when you're facing that current struggle, actually you can go back and remind yourself who God is and what he's already done. I think that's something maybe a lot of us don't do, but is an incredibly important discipline. Hey, Matt, good to see you. Any other thoughts on your end? Hey, Anna, your nail gun helped finish this trim in this room behind me. Thank you. One other thing I kind of noticed from verses 1 or 2, it reminds us right away that God is a God who listens and interacts. Sometimes maybe, depending on how our upbringing was, we kind of thought of God as a distant orb or deity, if that makes sense, kind of a Zeus construct, or he was kind of, well, whatever. And this really pushes back against this. It's really saying, no, we have an interactive God. And the interactive God both is a God who will talk to us and listen to us. And so I think that can be really helpful when you're thinking kind of through dynamics of a relationship, and especially when we're talking about kind of how does it connect with how we hear God best, particularly in moments of anxiety. And so maybe a question for you, I'd be interested, is what are the types of settings where you hear from God the most? This is a play along. Are there certain things you do or places you can be where you sense God's presence more than you sense it other places? And what does it look like maybe, hey, Soraya, good to see you. What does it look like to bring ourselves to those places? Nature, okay, yeah. Bike riding, ooh, 2 natures. Nature's big for me too. I think there's partially a removal of distraction that happens for me there. And the YouTube channel is up. I heard it's a little different timing than our Facebook, but it's at least something. All right, Brooke, when I'm doing something creative, people, community, we're seeing different gifts mixes here too emerge. Music, excellent. When large life-changing things happen, more than daily stuff. Awesome. Yeah. And now we're seeing the variety of God's gifts right in this group, right? Yeah, reading, that's one of God's primary revelations, right, through Scripture, through devotionals with other people, yep. So we're all creating the image of God in different ways, awesome. Ooh, digging in the dirt, because God created, right, this earth, and it's good, he said. That's good. Nature's a big one for me. Reading is a really big one for me. Some people it's through prayer. I think right now, have you noticed this? There's a lot of static, and not even necessarily bad static, but I was kind of wrestling through today. It was like, okay, do we need one more church video posted from another random church filling up your feed? If you're a pastor, every pastor right now, is this true pretty much, Sullivan? Every pastor right now is creating some sort of video sermon series. Ooh, running, that's a good one. Yeah. And so we don't want to just be one more news article, one more hot take, but actually trying to be really pragmatic here. Okay, so how do we better hear from God? And where can you put yourself in a moment where there's, frankly, a lot of anxiety and static to actually put yourself in a place where you can hear God? Ooh, the ocean. Yeah, my wife loves the ocean. Any other final thoughts or questions we had? Someone mentioned, hey, Brooke, good to see you. Someone mentioned, connection, one of your Bibles had a note connected with the Psalm of David, in chapter 18. Yeah, a lot of the Psalms reference each other. David writes certainly a lot of them. Some of them are attributed to other people. But yeah, no, that's a good observation. Whoever wrote that earlier. And now you're kind of testing my knowledge on the fly too. So this is fun and terrifying for me as well. In a moment, Sullivan will be joining me as my co-host. Any other thoughts on verse 1 or 2 before we move on? All right, hearing none. Moving into verses 3 and 4. The cords of death entangled me. The anguish of the grave came over me. And I was overcome by distress and sorrow, and then I call on the name of the Lord. Lord, save me. No wrong answer here. What sticks out at you in verses 3 and 4? Or questions you have? Hey, Kevin, I see a lot of other pastors checking in on this to see hey, is this something I should be doing or not? I don't know if this is something I should even be doing. So you're going to find out with me. Hey, Sherry. Anything stick out to you in verses 3 and 4? The first thing I think that sticks out with me, and it's only slightly prominent in this psalm, but if you move across other psalms, particularly under other genres of psalms, you have the psalmist being very honest with God, with his anger sometimes, with his disappointments, regrets. Lord, save me. Excellent. Yeah, absolutely. Ooh, I like this. Interesting that we have to see trouble before we tend to seek God. Yeah, it's kind of human nature. I think it's not always necessarily bad, but yeah, a couple people liking that. That's really good, Krista. I think in the psalm we're seeing it's okay to be honest with God with our emotions. Maybe depending upon our background or baggage, we thought I can't talk to God about that, or I can't bring that feeling. Or good Christians aren't really supposed to say or think that. This is good. Anu's saying, the Lord saving me sticks out because the image to start out with, the verse seems very hurtful, hard, and frustrating. Yeah. Okay, this is good. Verse 1 and 2, Anita's saying, actually really remind me of the different ways people come to God. Some literally cry out to Him. Yeah, yep. Different paths. God has to speak to us in different ways with different wiring. For some of us, it's an emotional connection. For some of us, there's intellectual aspects that kind of first we have to wrestle through. Yeah, but often, I mentioned this in the sermon, often it's in times of crisis that people are wrestling with deep existential questions, right? One of the reasons we're even trying this and pushing hard online is you realize there's a curiosity, a wrestling of why does this virus exist? What is the meaning of life? These are existential questions that in times of trial kind of bubble more to the surface of kind of the consciousness of our culture. So we can be really honest with God. And I think one of the things maybe is church people don't have it all together, but sometimes there's a stereotype that you're supposed to. And this really says you don't need to have it all together to get together with God, just go to God. Second thing, maybe this is references to is God is David's called, and he writes a lot of the Psalms. A man after God's own heart, and yet, if you were to do an autobiography of his life, he had some really difficult moments, some of which he causes, some he has nothing to do with. And I think this is one of those helpful Psalms to say, and I can't read your whole comment. Rats. Okay. Hey, Lisa Corey, it's been a long time. I hope you're well. God doesn't promise an easy life, but He promises a good life, and I think those are two different things. Yeah, that's a whole sermon, a whole study. I think good means things like fulfilling, purposeful. God sometimes shields us from difficult things, absolutely. And sometimes actually God is with us in those difficult things. Michael's chiming in. I think in moments like this, we also realize how much we're not in control, and we cry out to Him knowing or hoping. Yeah, absolutely. There's a kind of awareness of our own kind of mortality, as it were. Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts that I'll be quiet for a second, verses 3 and 4. I think, God sometimes shields us from difficulty, but he's always with us in the difficulty. And one of the things that Christians believe, right, wrong, or otherwise, I believe it, is that death isn't the worst thing that can happen to you. Yep, absolutely. Reminds me of Brendan Manning's book, Ragamuffin Gospel, but the Psalms are ruthlessly honest at times. I think you can tell, and it's rightfully so if you study again David's life. He's chased by his own family at times. It's an anxious life. He's a king. Anytime you're in leadership, I think with leadership comes responsibility, which often manifests sometimes in difficult moments as anxiety. Yeah, absolutely. And that just shows how loving God is when we're not that lovable. Here's one thing I was thinking about. David probably has his worst is worse than our worst. Not that I know all your stories or mine, but sometimes we'll, in moments, try to evaluate, well, that worst isn't as bad as my worst. And, David being pursued by people, his own son after him at one point. We'll tend to, in moments of difficulty or anxiety, try to figure out a calculator of like, well, maybe I shouldn't be this worried or anxious. And I think everyone's, how do I say this? Your worst is your worst, and for you, that's your worst. So, obviously I had cancer, leukemia, and so I have a pretty intense near-death number of stories. And I think earlier in my Christian journey, sometimes I'd run into people who are like, oh, I had cancer too, and I find out it's like skin cancer, right? And that can be serious, but sometimes isn't necessarily as serious. And so I would sometimes wrongfully say, well, that isn't in my head, right? That isn't as bad. And I think that's one, everyone's worst is their worst, right? So for them, that is actually, and it's okay that you're experiencing a certain level of anxiety, even if your level is, a particular event is different than this person. We all have these emotions, and we can all bring all these emotions, including our anxiety, to God. If you're being pursued, like David, yeah, that's anxious producing. Any other thoughts on 3 and 4? I think David's really specific with his anxiety. So the cords of death entangled me. Okay, that's poetic, but then he's drilling down, saying, "Here's what I'm really nervous about." He's identifying the emotion, and then kind of going deeper in that. And so sometimes this plays out based on our personality, but when we're anxious or afraid, a secondary good question to wrestle through with God is about what? What is it that makes me anxious? Now, you could say, okay, I'm really anxious about this test I'm taking. Okay, why? Well, different people might answer different ways. Well, I don't want to fail. Well, I want to look good. Well, I didn't feel like I'm prepared enough. Those are all radically different reasons behind the reason. And I think going one layer deeper with God can bring us a lot more awareness of ourselves and freedom from whatever is kind of hanging over us. Great question. Hard to say. Some Psalms we can mark exactly, to Anu's question, with an exact event in the life of David. Some, because of his journey being so incredibly difficult, you can't necessarily assert to one moment, but I can give you a number of moments where this could be true. A number of times when he's in the wilderness being pursued from his own son. This would fit pretty well. Yeah, that's a good question. Yep, absolutely, Matt Larson. We believe God is exercising his control. Hey, Lisa Anderson, hope you're well out in Circle Pines. And I think this also is showing us we sometimes tend to shelter our thoughts or feelings. But the Psalms remind us God's self-confident enough to be wrestled with. All right, we're moving on to verses 5 and 6. Any final thoughts before we move on? Hearing none, I'll kind of move on. So you're going to hear this Lord is gracious and righteous. This language shows up often in the Psalms and wisdom literature. Verse 5, the Lord is gracious and righteous. Our God is full of compassion. The Lord protects the unwary. When I was brought low, he saved me. Any words or thoughts kind of stick out, or other verses that maybe this kind of echoes? There's a few. God is filled with compassion. When I was reading this earlier today, and I'll be honest, I had a family emergency. It took me out for about 3 or 4 hours this afternoon. And I kind of, as I was reading this text, needed to just hear, like, you know what? That's okay. Even though I didn't, be able to, and I kind of have a really strong checklist in my mind. I don't know if that's how you're wired. I had to have God's compassion saying, you know what? It's okay. And so what are some areas, where you feel like you need God's compassion or grace today? I think, Lord bless our children. It was raining today, and they have a lot of energy. And the unwary is an interesting description. While you're onto this, go a Hebrew lexicon study on that text and give me the actual Hebrew word, or even look up a different translation. And let's do a word study on that one. Merciful, there you go. It might be the word Ray's word, beneficence. Simple-hearted, yeah. So probably what's going on there, the word might, and Sully might even be on this right now. Sully, you should do this. Is that a pretty uncommon word there in the Hebrew? I can't look it up. It's not in front of me. In verse 6, the Lord protects the unwary. We'll get to that in a second. Mine just says simple. Yeah. So typically when translations vary drastically, it's the word's hard to translate. Either because there's not a lot of those words in other places to kind of compare and contrast to build a library of definition. That can often be the case. Or it's a word simply that's hard to translate into English. I'll give you a couple different examples. So, and this is overly stereotyped, some of you might even know this, but the word love. In English we have the word love. In Greek, there's more than this. But there's 4 often that we'll kind of hear. You've heard the 4 loves, C.S. Lewis. And so when we try to translate it into love, it both does and doesn't capture the essence of a word. So often when you see translations that are different, something's going on there where the translators are having a harder time than usual to capture the full either essence of the word, or there's a slight wrestling through how best to translate that, if that makes sense. Yeah, you're getting this. The Lord is gracious because he understands us. Yep. And so because we believe Jesus is fully God, fully man, it isn't hyperbole or kind of pie in the sky concepts. We believe he gets this because he was one of us. Yeah. He's full of compassion. Here's a question. Who do you feel like God's asked? We're made in God's image. That's one of the neat things Christians believe, Imago Dei, or his masterpiece in Ephesus is Poema. And so who are some people you need to show grace? We're made in his image, so we need to not only receive grace, but also give grace and give compassion. Who are the folks that are popping into your head today? For us, it was a great day, but when you have 3 active kids and it's raining, extra grace required. Inside is a little nuts. Who are some folks that you're feeling, what does it mean in this moment, even in our culture, to show grace and compassion? Does that mean sharing the toilet paper? I don't know. Tim Keller makes this kind of point, and he's a Reformed theologian. I tend to be more an Arminian, and I'm paraphrasing grossly here, that if you don't think you need a lot of compassion or grace, coworkers, family, yep. Oh, great, yeah. School, the team you work with, yep. And particularly in this moment, right, for teachers, it's just so fluid. Yep, overworked. You're getting the nurses and doctors. The Target employees are stacking the shelves. I like when I went in to get some, I don't remember what I got yesterday, something. Looked them in the eye and humanized them and said thank you, and you could tell it really meant a lot to them. Parents, yep. Familiarity breeds contempt, right? And so sometimes those who are closest to, it's actually the hardest to be the most gracious and compassionate to. It's just how it works sometimes. Hey, Todd. Tim Keller has this kind of idea, and it's interesting to think through, like, if you don't think you need a lot of forgiveness, like, you're pretty good. Jesus was more just a self-improvement plan, which some people believe, right? And not someone who, gives you, just crazy amounts of love and forgiveness and grace. We tend to only be as generous to others as we think God has been generous to us. And so if it was an interesting thought of his, this idea where if you think you only need a little bit of Jesus' grace or compassion or forgiveness, you tend to be pretty stingy giving grace, compassion, or forgiveness to others. But if you think it's been lavished upon you, you tend to lavish it upon others. And I've kind of noticed that taking that orientation in my own life has been really helpful. Yeah, any other? Return to the rest of my soul, connecting back to verse 3. Yep, we don't have to work our way to God. Absolutely. We're going to get down to that verse. That's a fun verse, the rest verse. Yeah, so we believe we don't work our way up to God. God functionally worked his way down to us, the incarnation. Yeah, absolutely. Any other final thoughts on verses 5 and 6? All right, moving into verse 7. Yeah, this is a fun verse, and I was debating how much of the text do we want to try to unpack in 45 minutes, and we're kind of, it's fluid, we're learning as we go. Return to your rest, my soul, for the Lord has been good to you. I love that text. I've been kind of ruminating on all day. What sticks out to you? I need already shared now some insight. I was thinking about how many of us are furloughed on work. But there's a difference between being furloughed and rest. There's a difference between... no, you're fine. I was thinking about how a lot of us maybe are going to have extra time. And once more, yeah. Rest is, yes, there's a juxtapositioning there, right? And that's kind of a common thing in Hebrew, Hebraic poetry, right? Repetition's one, but then also is opposites. Day, night, light, dark. Here we have rest, anguish. I think to go back to your kind of anguish or anxiety comment, overcoming anguish or anxiety isn't necessarily about vanquishing the situation, but typically putting something like trust over the top of it. I gave an example I've been thinking about in my own life. So I hate swimming. Hate it. Terrified of water. And I go in it almost every week with my kids, not because I vanquished the fear. Do I believe in soul sleep? That's a fascinating question. So there are. I'll get on that in a minute. Don't let me forget. But I'm going to stay on target here for a minute. I think I've never overcome my fear of water, but I love being in the water with my kids more than I listen to my fear. And so I think often overcoming anxiety or anguish isn't necessarily about extinguishing what's causing the anxiety, but putting something over the top of it. And I think the author is saying, and that's trust of God. Anu's saying that whatever the situation was is over and now you can breathe and feel safe. Yeah. I've been thinking about a lot of us have downtime, but are we really resting, or are we kind of busying ourselves even in our downtime? And I think some of us know how to zone out. Most of us know how to zone out. We kill it at zone out at the Netflix. But how is that different than rest in what ways? Yeah, rest for your soul is like a deep thing, isn't it? To Matt's point, it's not just kind of like a good night's sleep. There's a kind of sort of existential that goes along with it, I think. To get to Sylvie's question, so soul sleep is a construct. This is a little bit of an addendum. Hang with me. Where what kind of happens to us after we die? There's a number of verses. Again, email me on this because I could go way off on a tangent. Silly, right? It's pretty easy for me to do. He's nodding his head. So some folks believe that Sai is your reaction to. So some folks will believe that there's this before kind of Christ's return. Essentially, all believers are in this stasis mode. Is a good way to put it. And there's certain texts I can send them to you if you'd like. That seem to, some people push hard towards this idea of, when Christ comes, all the dead will rise. And, then they must not be in heaven. Is that literal or figurative language? And people wrestle through it. I think it's a potential option. I would say, if there's die, defend, and discuss, the three circles of Christian theology, like, hey, this is the essentials. The resurrection, probably the creed really functions as a, right, wrong, or otherwise, a center of Christianity. Then you have the secondary tier of die, defend. So they're important. Denominations usually appear. And then discuss. I think soul sleep probably is somewhere out here. Simply, there's been a number of historians throughout history who've held it. N.T. Wright actually holds to a construct of soul sleep, who's probably one of your better New Testament theologians of our day. But what they're trying to get at, Sylvia, in that question of soul sleep, is what happens between, I die tomorrow and Christ's return is 100 years from now. Am I cognitive in heaven already, or is there some sort of pause? There's some verses that seem to indicate there might be some sort of stasis mode, and that's probably the best I can do in 3 minutes, but I could do a podcast on that sometime, I think. Yeah, rest and peace, I think, absolutely go together. And I think that Sai is right. I think a lot of us know a good night's sleep. But what we're being offered is something deeper here. I think really good rest, and the author is saying, involves trust. That when we rest, God isn't. That's kind of the whole top part of the verse, right? You've heard my cry. You protected me. Yeah. And I think we may not be busy right now because of work furloughs or whatever, but are we actually resting? Here's a question: how do you rest? Tell me about a time. I'd be interested in about a time when. What were some of the key ingredients? Yeah, for sure. And email me, Sylvie, if you want. Have more questions on the topic. I could give you kind of a list of thinkers who think this. Different text to look into. Yeah, rest is the opposite. Sometimes it really is the opposite of turmoil. Yep. And then sometimes there's rest in the storm. Jesus on the boat. That's a story in the Gospels. For those of you who have read it, Gospels are kind of a recording of the life of Jesus. Sometimes rest is the opposite of turmoil. Sometimes rest can even happen in turmoil, which I think is impossible. At least it seems odd. It's impossible if you think death is the worst thing that can happen to you. It's impossible. But if you don't think death is the worst thing that can happen to you, I think peace is possible even in storms. Ooh, campfires with fellow Christians. I love it. I got a heart. Did you heart that, Sully? No, no. That's a good one. Yeah. Sometimes there's those thin places where you get kind of a glimpse of what fellowship in heaven might be like. And those are kind of moments. Yep, and there's a cyclical nature, you're right, Carrie, to this psalm. And there are often, to many of them, kind of a cyclical nature. I think you're right. The heart is Sully here. Oh, perfect. All right. People, you're being talked about in the feed. What are things you do in anxious times to rest? Yeah, I increasingly, to your point, I feel like distance from technology helps me rest. I do see a correlation in my life where technology and anxiety tend to be handmaidens. I don't think they have to be, but yeah. I think in this moment with kind of the pandemic, we're doing a good job of taking care of our body, but what does it mean to take care of our soul? Focused breathing. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Deep breathing. I always do that before I had to have a lot of shots with cancer or needles or injections or transfusions. Absolutely. And this is a little bit of a tangent. The whole idea of Sabbath, or Christians take Sunday off. It's the first day of the week, a New Testament thing, different than the Jewish Sabbath, but that's what our tradition has done. The whole word Sabbath means kind of to stop or cease. Ooh, hymns are a big one for you. Yeah, the language of the hymns is pretty rich. Yeah. The whole idea of Sabbath is kind of a radical act of trust, right? To rest, to slow down, to think that you're more than what you produce. It's not just some kind of like arbitrary, well, on Sunday you're supposed to slow down, or whatever day you try to take a chunk off. It's actually for our good. Yeah, any other observations from the text? Yeah, work is both good and good for us. There's work in the garden before the fall, but everything has also been affected by the fall, and so I think it is. To your point, Krista, I think it is hard to find peace or rest at work. It happens, but it tends to be more challenging. I think because so much of, partially, I think our culture, we tend to praise the workaholic. And so good margin isn't praised often. Yeah. That's good. Any other insights? What's one thing okay, here's a question for you. I'd love to see your answers. What's one thing based on this text and our time together you're going to walk away that's going to either be a new insight, something you feel God's saying to you, or something you want to put into practice? New insight, something God's saying to you, or something you want to put into practice? What has it been as we've gone through this chunk of the psalm? Yep. Yeah, Zechariah. There's a couple other psalms that mimic that language too. The return to me type of language. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, resting in turmoil. Yeah, that text where Jesus rests in the boat would have been an interesting one. But it's not the absence of a storm that allows him to rest. It's something different and deeper. Yeah, Prophet Joel, chapter 2 has what is it? Turn back to me with all your heart. Um, there's a, kind of a lot of that turn language, turn about face, metanoia in the Greek, to turn around. Yeah, rest for the soul, rest for the body. Ooh, I like that. Totally different. I was listening to a podcast with a pastor, and they talked about like how we know sometimes we're spiritually empty. It's like, well, I had a full night's rest. What's up? And it's like, no, your body's tired, your soul's tired, and those are different things. And it's really good. It's really important to know those different things, and most of us don't realize those are different things. There's an interview with Craig Rochelle, who covenant pastor. If you know him, he's very hard charging, and so. It's classic 3 Enneagram. He's Carey Nieuwhof podcast. Yeah, rest while you have the chance to slow down from working home now. Absolutely. I'm seeing your posts as they come in. I don't know how close it is with real time. We're about ready to wrap up here. Any other, something you learned, something you're going to put into practice, or something God said to you right now? Yeah, I think the post where someone said rest while I have the chance to slow down and work from home. That's saying, God, what in this moment actually there's opportunity as well as challenge. So I think right now speaking for the church, there's an opportunity actually. People are curious. People need to be served. People may be short on food. This is an opportunity for us to be the light of Christ, right? So and most of our challenges and trials, there's always opportunity as well. Yeah. Easier said than done, and hard to even say that sometimes when they're really difficult challenges. And you don't want to usually say that to another person. That needs to be a you and God flushing out thing often, or otherwise you're Job's friends. Yeah, any other pieces of discernment or wisdom? Well, I want to... this is good. I'm seeing more now on log on here. Yeah, call on the name of the Lord when I'm struggling. Absolutely, rather than yourself. Yeah, the church needs no walls. It's not brick and stone, it's flesh and bone. Yep. We have to be creative in how we connect flesh and bone, but that is absolutely true. Yeah, there's always going to be plenty of fires, especially in this moment. And when is enough enough? Absolutely. I missed, Sarah, what you said. I lost it in my feed. I don't know if I touch my phone, I'm worried it'll fall off the tripod. So I'm not going to touch it. Yeah. Any other final thoughts before we end our night? Yeah, God is okay. That's great, Sarah. I just read yours. God is always listening with his ear turned to us. Feel free to cry out. Yeah, I think sometimes maybe our prayers aren't answered because we don't pray them. That's a little cliche, but I think how I'm wired, I think I typically try something, and then if that doesn't work, pray versus pray and then try it. And that might be very kind of Western pragmatism that can be a weakness at times. Not that we're not called to use our own mind, but certainly difficulty there. Yeah, well, I'm going to wrap up our night tonight. A couple things I want to ask of you all. There's a number of you watching. One, Facebook message me what you found most helpful about this time and what you felt like God was saying to you this time. And so we want to always improve this as a tool to connect with one another and to grow. We realize that's challenging this moment, and so we want to go above and beyond to be the body and to really lean into caring for one another. That'll help us grow if you give us good feedback. So even while you're just thinking right now, like, hey, this is good, hey, this is awkward, here's one idea. Secondly, if you have friends, particularly right now, we're the church. Let's reach out. People are lonely already. It's an epidemic, but this is, I think, only increasing that. So let people know this exists and that they don't have to have any prior church experience or faith experience to be a part to check in on this. That's the other thing. And then third, we'll be back again next week at 8:15 to 9 o'clock doing the exact same thing. I'll try to get the psalm out a full 24 hours in advance to you all so you can read it. Not that it's required, it's sometimes helpful. And next time we'll have someone else join, a mystery guest. I don't even know who it'll be. But maybe we'll have a mystery guest kind of join us so we can have some fun back and forth as well. Again, I want to thank you for your time. And let me just pray for us. God, I pray for all my friends in this group right now. I'm thankful that we get a chance to connect to God. Thanks for people like programmers and for tools like YouTube and like Facebook and how they give us opportunities in these moments to lean on one another and to learn and to grow. I pray for those right now, God, who are just pedal to the metal. The various workers or hospital chaplains and doctors and nurses, bless them, give them strength. For those who are fearful, God, would you, there seems to be the bridge between, fear and peace seems to be trust. Trust seems to be the bridge between the two as so I think through that. So help us to be people of trust. It's not the absence of fear often, God, it's putting something above it. And so we're going to put trust in front of it. Help us. It's not easy. God, we pray for those who are older, who are immune compromised, who have anxiety, who are currently sick. It doesn't even have to be with this virus, but just with the world isn't perfect yet. And all of creation groans, your word says. And so we groan with them, and we ask for your strength and your peace to be upon them. God, may we not just sleep tonight, may we rest tonight. And so we pray that, and we need your power to do that. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, friends, we will see you next week. I hope you have a great night.